that helped sort of edify a worldview that I think I held already.
Mm.
Um, and that there's wisdom available everywhere, and you don't have to be special to access it. And there is no hierarchy. It's available for all of us. And I like the egalitarian democratic nature of that as well. Like we all have access to wisdom and spiritual support.
Welcome back to the Alive and Kicking podcast, everybody. I think we're in for a treat today because we have as our guest Brian Schlaak. Hi, Brian.
Hi, how's it going?
Good, good.
Good.
How are you?
I'm excited to talk with you today.
Good, good.
Yeah.
Well, I don't usually read people. I ask for people to, kind of give me their background and their bio, and I don't usually read it because I like to come into the conversation and use the interview as a way to get to know people. I feel like it's a little bit fresher that way. But for some reason, I decided this morning to read through everything that you sent me. And I feel like you are the perfect example of the kind of individual that this podcast is actually designed to explore. And that is allegedly ordinary people living extraordinary lives.
Mm.
And I feel like if I had run into you in a line of a coffee shop, I would never guess that your professional and personal background is so rich and illustrious and strange and wonderful, and how you have this kind of combination of being both highly successful and also deeply, deeply committed to service, which I feel like is kind of a rare
Mm.
combination. So I'm plus
Mm.
just love your company. So
Thank
for
you.
those people, obviously nobody knows how we met, and I like to talk about that a little bit. So
Right.
we haven't known each other that long in person, although you are married to one of my good friends who, in the past, has been a subject of the Alive and Kicking podcast, Thea Sullivan, who also participates in our What We've Learned So Far podcast. And so I've known you only through, her perspective and got to meet you recently. And yeah, I just love being in your company. And so this is going to be a fun conversation.
Entirely mutual, Kay. Like I'm really excited. So
All right.
yeah, and I really enjoyed hanging out with you too. So thank you for asking me.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I'm so happy you're here. Okay, so we're going to dive in. And I happen to know from the very few stories that you have told that you grew up with what I'm going to call a small but dynamic cast of characters, aka your family.
Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit about that early formative family life that you had.
Oh, okay. I mean, really interesting because, how often do you get to actually reflect on this kind of stuff? My dad was a career Army officer. And so I came up as an Army brat in the Vietnam era, in a lot of different parts of the United States, a handful of times abroad. We moved every year until I started high school. So it was 13 moves between birth in Bamberg, Germany, and my dad's retirement in DC. So it was kind of a crazy, crazy upbringing. He was a sort of an incandescent, burned hot kind of human being who I think, he liked uh, war and military and was, he was kind of a deep pool there. Both my folks are gone now. Um, both powerful personalities. My mom was a force to be reckoned with intellectually and just in terms of her presence, strong, dynamic, really powerful woman. When my kid was born, what I said was this being loved by my mother was like standing next to a blast furnace. Like it would almost melt you, which is such a gift. And when my kid was born, a lot of that heat shifted to the kid. And it was a relief for me because it's an intense experience. And B, I was just so, happy that my kid was going to receive the power of that. So both really strong personalities, really, really different from each other. My dad with his army thing, my mother was the most politically liberal person I've ever encountered, like, a socialist probably, and an atheist. And my dad was a church going guy, and, but they managed to stick it out, I think, mostly through my dad's absences. Until he retired from, from the military. And once they had to live together for extended periods, they parted ways. And she was a lawyer and went on her own trajectory. Just a couple of interesting things because I was born in Germany in 61. The Berlin Wall went up, and my dad was sent to the front lines because the Russians had sent I think it was somewhere close to 1 million troops to ensure that that all went the way they wanted it to go. And this is apocryphal, but from my mom, who was prone to exaggerate, but they said to the families, "Get in your cars and drive west." So we did, and that was sort of the opener. Um, I lived in Tuscaloosa, Alabama. When I was in fourth grade, my dad was in grad school at the University of Alabama, and I went to a segregated school because they wouldn't integrate. So they had cut off the federal funding. There were 56 kids in my fourth grade class, and we were sitting on bookshelves. And I probably had the best teacher I've ever had, Mrs. Sproul, back in the day. Just little stories from back then. And then I did early middle school in Buenos Aires, Argentina. um, my dad was an attaché at the embassy down there. And Juan Peron came back from exile in the little window that we were there. And he had been sent off by the military, I think, and came back into power and said he was going to kill every American in Argentina. I just remember it because it was so boys playing army, I think. But all these families who lived in our neighborhood came to our house, and the women and kids went upstairs, and the dads sat downstairs with M16s all night, and nothing transpired. But it's sort of a flavor of that window in time, like the 60s were their own creation, and then being a sort of a military family in the midst of all that. It was a colorful upbringing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, there's so much to unpack there in terms of, its influence on you and your trajectory, but it seems like I've talked to other people who come from military families, and of course, the moving frequently has all of its own challenges, which I think we're, probably familiar with by now. But you also had this extremely, I use the word dynamic because that's how it feels to me. That you had to find your roots in your family, I'm guessing, because there's no physical rooting. So how did that inform who you became?
It was kind of a triad. It was my mother, my brother, and I. My brother's 6 years younger than me. She had trouble conceiving and carrying a baby to term after I was born. In military medicine at the time, just said go back and just keep trying. And I think it was a very trying period for my mom. um, which, in retrospect, it's hard to imagine how profound that may have been for
Mhm.
her. She had a stillbirth, like some pretty intense stuff, and then they adopted my brother when I was turning 7. Um, but that, I would say it was my mother, my brother, and I who were the nucleus of that. My dad was off. He was 2 years in Vietnam, uh, fighting, and then in the attaché stuff, he was just gone a lot of the time until he retired. So um, it was formative. My brother still lives really close by. My mom was over a lot particularly after my kid was born. So that was our little safety net. I think on the upside of that was, you learn that the world is a broad, interesting, varied, sometimes scary place. You learn how to integrate. I was probably a little chameleon like as a kid, and then the downside is rootedness is never, I've just never been very good at it.
Mm,
Uh, we've even Thea and I over the course of our adult life have moved a lot of times, and I get restless, and people say, "Where are you from?" And I have sort of a pat answer, but I don't really know that answer. Uh,
hmm
I think it's a little bit of a mishmash of Midwestern parents and a California sort of high school, college, most of my professional life in California. But I don't have that rooted sense of place, which
Yeah.
is, been a blessing and a little bit of a challenge.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Isn't it interesting that when you meet new people, one of the top questions is, where are you from?
right,
You know, it's like, how is that relevant? Like, how
right,
does that?
right,
But I guess it is because when I think about you, I think of you as being a Midwesterner, and
right.
because I'm from the Midwest, and I know,
Yeah,
like, I know I'm so familiar with that Irv, so to speak.
yeah, yeah,
And but there's also something very California about you. So tell
yeah.
us a little bit about your life in California and your college years and
Yeah, no, what a trip. Just by way of transition. So we were living in Arlington, Virginia when my dad retired from the military, and I loved it there. My grandparents were there, and we had moved every year, and my parents were like, one more, we're moving to California, and I said, I'm not going. I was 13. And my dad, a different era of parenting, was like, "We'll figure it out." And so I found a friend of mine, Jimmy Leach, who I just reconnected with this year, who said, "Yeah, you can come live with me and my family." And I did. So my parents left in August, and I stayed with them until the end of October. I think the rationale at the time was to stay through football season. And then my mom called and was like, that's enough." And to California we came, but it was begrudging for me. I love it now, particularly in the current zeitgeist. Like, Thea and I lived in San Francisco for a long time, 20 years, and what I loved about that town is you could walk out of your house in a skirt and nothing else as me, and nobody would say a peep to you all day. Like, it's you just be you, which I think is an interesting counterbalance with some of that Midwestern formation,
yeah.
And
Hmm.
you and I talked about this briefly, but I probably have three best friends in the world, and all of them have Midwestern parents. So I think there is some sort of resonance that you
Hmm.
can feel, and I don't know whether it's culture or values but I felt it with you also. It's like there's an unspoken set of sort of behaviors and rules that have sort of come with an upbringing in that geography. And the California one is quite different, actually.
Hmm.
It's been really fun, but probably because of those formative years with my folks, I think that value system probably has taken priority for me in terms
Hmm.
of whatever that ethos is, if
Yeah.
you're from those places.
So you talked a little bit about your parents being of different ends of the spectrum
Mm,
spiritually,
mm.
and I'm wondering how that played out in the home.
Yeah.
Was there conflict over that, or did it just fall into a natural rhythm? And what were you expected to participate in or
Yeah,
not?
it's an interesting question. I was baptized, so I think culturally my parents were sort of Presbyterian. They were sort of Calvinist in their formation, and a lot of those, not in terms of sort of industry, get up early, work hard, don't complain. Thea's culturally Catholic, and we've had a lot of interesting conversations through time about the differences there. Like Catholic have their own mishigas, but they're free to sort of complain. And in my household, that was not really done. Like, take care of your business, keep your mouth shut. You know, Sort of justifying being well-to-do, I think, was part of that. Right? Sort of rationalizing wealth through hard work and diligence and there was much less conversation about people with less. Like I would we went to a very liberal Catholic church in San Francisco for a while where, homeless people would jug the communion wine and two-thirds of the congregation were gay, a third probably. But and I loved it there, like it was wild and wacky, but it was much freer and more joyful in a certain way than sort of my more puritanical upbringing. My mom was a very unconvincing atheist. She and all her siblings claimed atheism, and my mom would cry in church. Like, there was some cognitive dissonance there, I think, for her. And my dad went every Sunday his whole life and was not a well-behaved man, really in any way, shape, or form. So you can interpret that as you will. But he sort of ran wild on the earth, and but church was grounding for him. And I'm sure some of that was war. Like he saw a lot of things that
Hmm.
would be really, really hard to see, which he didn't really talk about. But 2 years sort of in the jungles in Vietnam, I think,
Hmm.
brought him as close to God as you could get.
Hmm.
Though when he was close to death, I said, if you had to do it all over again, would you do the same thing? And he said, yeah, which I found really interesting. I
Hmm.
said, so you go back to Vietnam again? And he said, yeah. And I asked him why, and he said, it's the most alive I've ever felt.
Oh.
You know,
Oh, yes. I mean, that is what they say. You hear that
right?
about combat vets coming back, and there's no comparison. Life seems flat without that kind of action, like.
Well, yeah, I think that's right. And he ended up going into the lumber business when he came out into civilian life. And I always think he thought it was kind of stupid. Um, like he couldn't really get the point of it. And probably that impacted us because it wasn't like it was a secret that he didn't
Mhm.
place a lot of value on money or that kind of status. Like he just wasn't very interested in that. And
Mm.
neither was my mother, actually. She was sort of whatever. That might be that Midwestern slant,
Mhm. Mhm.
but don't get too big for your britches.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it seems like there was this sort of undercurrent of some spiritual essence,
Hmm.
different ways of needing it, different
Hmm.
ways of addressing it. Were you in your earlier years aware of any kind of spiritual moving through you?
Yes. In retrospect, sort of, I was aware of these Satori sort of transcendent breakthroughs that we all get blessed with periodically, where whatever the stars align and the portals open, and you almost feel like you can see
Mm.
sort of what the point of the enterprise is, just little quick flashes of, you know, um, for sure. I had an interesting moment when I was in ninth grade, and there was a girl I liked who was going to, I forget what they call it. Uh, Way they called it Soul Time then. So it was sort of a Christian youth group, and there was a camp, and the camp was supposed to be really fun. And this girl I liked was going to the camp, and I asked my mom if I could go to the camp, and she's like, "You want to go to Christian camp?" And I'm like, "Well, yeah, yeah, we'll learn it." She didn't, I mean, didn't feel right saying no, so she's like, "Sure." Um, but that was because it had been so peripatetic and we'd moved so much. Like it was, there was a lot of conversation with these sort of young ministers about these kind of questions. And I had a little transformative experience up there because I felt seen in a certain way by those guys that helped me. I think it was sort of early awareness of service and which felt compelling to me. So, yeah, it played a little bit of a role. I found the church part dissonant
Mm.
because it was a kind of an affluent town and a lot of guys in gray suits feeling pretty important. And
Mm.
I just didn't feel that much. But the conversations about sort of spirit and service and what is the point of the enterprise? Why are we here? I think those questions pre-existed that, and it gave me a frame to think about what are we doing here? Like,
Mhm.
I don't think working hard to get more stuff is probably the answer.
Was it their their act of service themselves, their example that was striking to you, or something
Well,
deeper?
that's an interesting question because it's going to segue into what I'm going to ask you later. It was they were interested in my 14-year-old story, which that was novel for me, like to tell us a little bit about. And they empathized in the right places and sort of acknowledged in the right places in a really sort of powerful way. It's sort of the power of being seen, which I think is what, well, we'll ask that later, but it's what you're doing. People who ask questions that are personal and profound in nature and actually are interested in the answer doesn't happen very often,
Mm.
actually.
Hmm.
Um, and I think it
So weird
was,
because I feel like
I
every
know
conversation I have is like that.
that's because that's what you're here
Yeah.
doing, right? To me,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
It's what I'm going to ask you about later, but it's profoundly unusual in my experience.
Mm.
Most people want to talk about themselves.
Mm.
Um,
Yeah.
and sometimes it's polite interest. There are lots and lots of exceptions. Like I'm not
Yeah.
sort of painting with a broad brush, but genuine interest in other people and their experiences isn't all that common in
Yeah.
my experience.
I wonder if it's more common for young boys slash men than it is for women because I just spoke with a guest yesterday and he said the exact same thing
Interesting.
that his sort of awakening had to do with someone actually taking interest in him for the first
Right.
time. Yeah,
Right.
same, almost the exact
Yeah.
same
Similar.
thing.
Yeah.
And I what I said to him was how impactful these small offerings of attention and awareness can actually be in a person's life because
Right.
especially now because we're so distracted by from awareness by
Right.
everything. I
Right.
see like moms and walking their babies in strollers with and they're on the phone. I'm
Right.
thinking I'm
Right.
so glad I didn't have a phone then
Right.
because I probably would have been doing the same thing.
Oh, you're exhausted.
Multitasking,
Of course. Yeah. Yeah.
multitasking. Like I'm
Yeah.
all about getting shit done, excuse me.
Right.
But
No.
yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think your gender question is really a good one because women do this for each other
Mm,
much more,
mm,
commonly than men do. And there's a lot of, I've watched my parents' generation, then my generation after divorce, and I don't want to again stereotype too much. Women tend to do okay, and the men don't. Like they tend not to stay by themselves. I've seen some of my friends go through it. It's like a panicky,
hmm.
like I gotta get, and they wouldn't say it because it sort of imbues that conversation with too much dependence.
Yeah.
But the reality is that dependence is there, and we rely on a certain kind of communication with our partners for those of us in heterosexual relationships, right? And women are just they're better at it. This is coming, we'll get there eventually, but sort of where my spiritual philosophical thinking is in the moment. Um, like men need to evolve.
Yeah.
Um, and it needs to happen reasonably
Quickly.
soon. Yeah,
Yes, please.
yeah. Well, it's almost, I mean, I'll just sort of say it, but we need 75 generations of matriarchal leadership to try to bring this thing back. Like, I'm worried about the species, and I don't want to get too dramatic, but you can't, men keep creating woolly mammoths to fight, and I think it's probably evolutionary. And I think if we could relinquish power to women, like traditional worldly power, there's
Mhm.
all this capacity in men that is just not tapped. Like there are men who do, but as a general rule, it almost feels like we're making war to justify our own existences as men because
Mm.
we're not quite sure
Yeah.
what to do, you know? Like women, you make a life in your body and then you produce the life and then your body makes the food to sustain the life, you know, and it's pretty, when you really step back from that, it's a pretty astonishing reality,
Hmm.
and we don't do that. And we have a role to play and all that's fine. I'm not
Yeah.
trying to demean men. I just think there's another use for what we don't know what we're capable of outside of trying to maintain this sort of patriarchal power.
Yeah.
And I think for our species to do what it needs to do like that, there needs to be a pretty profound shift.
Yeah.
Um, yeah.
Well,
Anyway,
something that you said sort of like perked up my ears a little bit. And you use the word spiritual, philosophical, like almost
Mhm.
like they were one word. And I
Mm.
feel like that is like part of perhaps this male safety valve into spirituality. If
Yep.
they can combine it with philosophy, then,
Mhm.
like maybe that's a gateway drug. I don't know.
Right.
But
Right.
because I think there many men are afraid, and I can relate to this because I also was afraid to fully embrace the idea of spirituality in terms of being a spirit, having a human experience, and I think
Mm.
it's even tougher for men. So
Yeah.
can you kind of take us through your path a little bit and how your spirituality sort of blossomed from? Do you
Well,
still
I think,
consider it a spiritual, philosophical?
yeah, and I'm cool with going there. Like it's an interesting. So I tended to have most of my, which I don't think is unusual. A lot of my, sort of openings happened in nature. Like it was a precipitating experience for me. Um, and that got me to thinking about sort of the nature of things and what's alive and what has consciousness and what doesn't. I don't want to over intellectualize it. Um, but nature could lift me out of my mishigas, right? Um, Early. I was going through a rough patch. My best friend died of cancer when I was 20, and that changed my trajectory. But I went to a pretty dark, anxious place for a little window of time because I wasn't really dealing with it. And the way I got out of it, I went on a whitewater rafting trip, and it sucked me back into the moment.
Mhm.
Um, And I was like, oh, okay. Like it was tactile and sensual and, enervating, like it gave energy and excitement. And I was like, okay, so there's a way forward through this, that can help pull you out of what you're perceiving to be the smallness or sort of mortality or the littleness of the world. And I held that, whatever my 20s were, I did a lot of stuff in my 20s, I think probably trying to keep the demons at bay a little bit. And I had this precipitating factor. It's like, it's finite. Like my best friend just died at 20, right? Time's limited. You don't know. So I kind of did everything I could think of, probably good and bad, for 10, 10 years or so. And it was really growth inducing and really interesting. Um, and then early in theonized relation, so I did a stint in the Peace Corps, and that was sort of the end of um, that wild window. And I got pretty, the way I conceptualize it, there are these concentric circles of self, and the center circle is who we perceive ourselves to be. And I was a handful of concentric circles away from that behaviorally by the end of that experience. And I started going to therapy, psychotherapy, sort of one-on-one traditional psychotherapy to try to find my way back to where I thought my center was, right? And Thea and I had started, and she was on a very powerful spiritual path that was very present. She was a really good influence on me because she brought me into an experience in San Francisco that I didn't know existed. All kinds of interesting explorations there, as you might imagine. Um, so she sort of was like a guide for me to bring me, out and into a different kind of reality there. We went to a fundraiser at a place called Spirit Rock, which was a Zen meditation center in Marin County, north of San Francisco. And the guest speaker was a guy named Michael Harner, he was an anthropologist, Berkeley trained anthropologist who had done all this research on shamanism globally. And he didn't, he wasn't a salesman. He wasn't trying to sell a package. And really, the bulk of his thing was sort of talking a little bit about shamanism. And they took us all on a shamanic journey, that sort of a guided visualization with some, he had studied shamanism all over the world. It's the oldest spiritual form on the planet. Everybody is descended from shamans. It doesn't matter. who you are of what you've become. Like that's how things started. Yeah, they call it animism. And anyway, so we did this journey, and in the journey, a bear bit my head off, crushed it like a grape, and then licked out the neck cavity. And I was like, what the fuck? Excuse my language, and we come back from the journey and he has this big smile on his face and he said, did anybody get decapitated? And I was like, you know, what the hell was that? And he's like, that's good. That's a good sign. And then I was sort of hooked. And then so anyway, I'm in 20 years or so of that kind of exploration, though I don't pretend to be an expert in that stuff. But that's sort of everything's alive. Like the trees are alive and the rocks are alive, and they're not less conscious or more conscious than us. I don't believe in humans as the top of a pyramid in any way, shape, or form. Like we're part of a web, a fabric of life, all of which has consciousness and all of which is animated and alive. And we're just part of that ethos. And I don't think other beings owe us things like cows don't owe us food. Like, anyway, so it changed. That helped sort of edify a worldview that I think I held already.
Mm.
Um, and that there's wisdom available everywhere, and you don't have to be special to access it. And there is no hierarchy. It's available for all of us. And I like the egalitarian democratic nature of that as well. Like we all have access to wisdom and spiritual support.
Hmm. Wow. So my first question that came to me was, is this awareness that there's equal consciousness in all living things? I'm assuming living things.
Mm.
Was that a humbling experience or a lifting experience? Did that make you feel more comfortable or less comfortable?
Well, it's been a little bit of a through line. I worked in Alaska for a little while in my 20s, and the most interesting thing about being in Alaska is how small you are.
Mm.
You're walking around in the middle of Denali National Park and you're like, I'm a speck, you know? And
Hmm.
so this stuff has always fascinated me. I just read a piece. This is a long way around to answer your question, but I just read a piece where they took the most, it's not the Hubble, it's the most recent version of the Deep
James
Field
Webb.
Telescope. That's the one. Thank you.
My son works on the James Webb.
Oh, God bless them. That is some of my favorite stuff, man. So interesting.
Yeah.
So they aimed it at the darkest part of the sky that they could perceive from there. It was 1/24 millionth of the sphere of the sky. And they said the size of the field was the equivalent of holding a grain of sand at arm's length. And then they did that deep field picture just to see what they would see in that small a piece of space. And there were 5,500 galaxies in that tiny little grain of sand comprised of billions of stars each. And that stuff, for whatever reason, makes me really happy. And I don't know
Mm.
what that's about, you know. So, I mean, the upshot of it is like, I like feeling like I'm in my place.
Mm.
Um, I find that comforting,
Yeah.
for whatever reason. And if you go into the woods, like the woods are aware, they're awake. There's all kinds of wisdom there. Go swim in the ocean, swim in a beautiful lake. Like you're having an experience that isn't just your experience. Like you're communing, I think, with these environments. There, even cities. I love cities. I was just in New York for a wedding, and I love New York, but that has its own energy that
Mhm.
isn't just the people. Like there's something going there.
Mhm.
Uh, and whatever, maybe it's sort of the synergy of all that, but yeah. So I love that feeling of a smallness and also connectedness. So I think both are true.
Yeah, you're diving into a little question that I had for you later.
Yeah.
Interesting. So I want to get back to the exploration of shamanism because
Mm,
I've never had anybody on the show who
mm,
is from, I don't even want to say it's not a tradition, it's
yeah.
something else, and that's part of why I need you to help me understand a little bit what it is that we're talking about when we're talking about shamanism.
So I'll give you the take of, there's a lot of sort of perspective on this, and I am not an expert. So just to own that up front. Um, the shamanistic belief system, I think, A, is that everything is alive and has consciousness. All of the natural world, everything that we're interacting with, rocks, all of it is alive. It's part of this living field. Um, they believe that all of us, every individual, has, helpful and healing spirits in two different locations. So we occupy a space called middle world, where we do our day-to-day sort of business. And there's sort of the vagaries of morality and behavior and all of that stuff happens in middle world. When you learn how to journey, which the practice I follow is through the foundation of shamanic studies, is through what they call sonic driving. So they found a drum beat that is a certain rate of beats per minute that will help alter your consciousness. And then you're trained a technique by which to access upper world and lower world. And in that belief system, you're transcending a barrier which you pass through very consciously out of middle world into an upper world where there is no sort of vagaries of morality or questioning. Everybody in upper world is a helpful or healing spirit. And everybody in lower world is also a helpful or healing spirit. And you have to get a little bit out of the Christian sort of overlay of up and down. Um,
Mhm.
Lower world tends to be more animal spirits, and upper world tends to be other kinds of spirits. I think, in some parlance, like angels are up there, guardian angels are up there, but that you can go, and once you've sort of mastered that technique of going either to upper world or lower world, you can go with questions or ask for healings or ask for healings for other people if they've given you permission to ask. Um, like Thea accesses guidance from who she calls her guides, right? And in my, sort of cosmology, that would be, probably spirits in upper or lower world who give you like a broader perspective and wisdom that we all have access to. So I'll go with questions about work or about my kid, where they more often than not tell me to mind my own business. They're like, your kid's business is your kid's business, but it's what I worry about. It tends to be about service. The focus for the foundation in any case is that we're here to serve the world in that form. Um, and that there's real power there. That's a little more esoteric. Uh, and that's sort of the duty. So it's not a self-serving, egocentric. It's sort of the opposite of
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
And the other thing I liked about it, and then I'll let it go, is, there was a woman named Amanda Folger who she won't care if I talk about her. She was the first real teacher I had, and it's sort of anti-woo-woo, if that makes sense, which is, California has an array of you can get as woo-woo as you want in our great state. But I like the practicality of it, and they're not interested. There's an ethos sometimes where it's like competitive yoga, who can do more yoga or who meditates longer. Like we apply all these weird human principles to these spiritual practices. And it's anti all of that. We're not interested in your sexy story about what you saw in upper world. Like it's a pragmatic, uh, practical, accessible spiritual form.
I was listening to a podcast the other day, and the guest was referring to somebody else who said that Westerners should not meditate because in the Western mind, meditation is for their own
Right,
peace of mind, their
right,
own,
right,
journey. And
right,
in the Eastern way of meditating, a person is meditating for the betterment of the world.
right.
So it sounds like there's a similar vein there.
Well, and
And
you get both because part of it is when you're in upper world on a journey, like you feel empowered, like you feel like it's like energy. You can enter. there's means by which to sort of energize yourself. But the thought is you're not energizing yourself for you. You're energizing yourself to sort of do your work
Mm-hmm.
in the world.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So, can you kind of take us through a journey that was particularly impactful if we're not crossing any boundaries there?
Yeah.
Something, so that we can understand how it works and what the value is to the individual?
Yeah. Anymore, I journey on anything. I did a workshop called Death and Dying, which is you begin your journey from the moment of your death and you just sort of see what happens. Um, I had a cousin who just passed just recently. And so for me, and I think there is no dogma about what these places look like it's in your own experience. But there is a place in lower world for me, which again is outside of middle world, where dead people go to sort of, they're dancing in a circle around a fire that's being overseen by this old sort of rabbinical looking man. I mean, he probably looks like Jesus would have looked had Jesus gotten old. Like he looks like an old Middle Eastern guy. Um, and people are kind of dancing themselves back into joy before they go and start processing what their life was about, right? Before you go to your life review. Um, and I have a cousin who just passed from cancer. He was in his 50s and, sad, but I wanted a journey to sort of see if he was there and see how that was. Um, and so I went to lower world and he was in the circle and then sitting on the hillside, um, sort of watching him, and waiting happily, benevolently were my grandpa, my dad, and my dad's twin brother, who was his dad.
Wow.
And just kind of waiting for him to get back to that equilibrium place spiritually where they could, sort of take him on to what was next. And they smile and they were, it's like, it's not this reverential thing. Like they're kind of giving each other shit, which is what they did in life. Their spirits were still them.
Yeah. Yeah.
And they had been waiting for him, you know, as he sort of struggled through his cancer. So it's that sort of thing. Like, and I came back from that journey feeling great. I'm like, those guys got it, like they're going to catch him,
Yeah.
and help him through,
Yeah.
just like they did for each other, I'm sure.
Yeah.
So there's an example.
Yeah. That's beautiful. I feel like we need one of those joy ceremonies in real life.
I know.
Like,
I
yeah, let's
know.
get in a circle and dance before we sit down and talk about what's really going on.
Right. No, right. It's
It
sort
makes
of
sense.
come to a good place of sort of equilibrium and peace before you start thinking about what it all meant or
Yeah.
means. I
Yeah.
totally agree with that.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's very valuable. And it would be so instructive in an interpersonal relationship as well. To
Right.
sort of like, what are we outside of this problem that we're facing? Just a little review, just a little
Right.
like,
A
here's the
little
good,
reminder.
a little reminder. Yes. Outside
Yeah.
of the heat. Let's get into the
Right.
heat
Right.
later. Yeah.
Right. Right.
So in this practice, I mean, obviously you have a drum, right?
Mhm. I do.
And is this something that you do you have a space that where you do this practice, or do you go out into nature somewhere? I'm assuming it's both, or
Well, that's a great question because I also lived a pretty, I have friends who are just unabashed, like they're on the beach banging the drum, journeying away. And I had kind of a square life too, like, so I
Mhm.
was whatever, a headmaster and whatever, had kind of a square career too. And this is work for me, like I'm working on this, it was kind of a bifurcated
Mhm.
experience for me. And, I would go off on these week-long trainings and I would call it spiritual professional development, on the square side to sort of, and whatever, I worked at a spiritual school, but, to sort of figure out how to code something that would feel okay to that side so I could go learn what I needed to learn.
Yeah.
And inevitably, multiple times through the course of these many years and lots of weeks of togetherness with groups of people, everybody's like, so when are you gonna, you know,
Wow.
come out, right? And right after I left, actually, it was after, I think I wrote an article for their publication about my introductory experiences and what a gift it's been. The guy had passed away, the founder. Um, and what a global spiritual construct that was. And that was sort of my coming out party. But I'm still shy about it. Like
Yeah.
I'm a private person anyway,
Mhm.
for the most part. And I still do it, in secret. Ironically, my kid moved out. So Thea's always been pretty good about setting up a space in our house for her work and her practice, and she feels very powerful and entitled in that regard in a really good way. Like,
Mhm.
I need a place to do my work that's not your place and not our place. Like, it's my place. And I'm sitting in here now, like this is my first crack at having a space that isn't at work. And it's been really freaking interesting because
Mhm.
I can feel the potentiality of it. Like, I don't know what the potential is yet, but yeah, I can feel the potentiality of that. And there's growth for me in this regard. Like coming out with I guess we're doing it now.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It's your
coming out,
coming out party.
coming out party. Yeah, really.
Your debutante ball.
Right. And I'm on boards and whatever. Like, it's sort of funny.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, but there's no way. For a long time, I felt like I couldn't afford. Like, we were raising a kid, and we had all the, like, sort of grown up responsibilities. But now I kind of give a shit as much about that. So this is exactly where I am developmentally, is
Mhm.
sort of going farther out in a way that isn't a secret.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I can relate to that so much. Because I mean, I still live in bifurcation myself a lot of the
Yeah.
times, especially with like certain people.
Right.
I don't talk about it. I'm not asked about it.
Right.
So there is a little bit of a closet going on there. And I think that one of the things that's pressing that forward is that the times are changing, like
Right.
that kind of behavior from someone in your position, I'm sure would not have been tolerated. Like, it would have raised a lot of fear and questions and doubts and all of that. And so now we're moving into this space where it is more spiritually diverse, and
Right.
those practices are becoming a little more mainstream, like sound healing and meditations and
Right.
all of that. And so it's like part of us is rooted in the old world, and part of us,
Right.
like our heart, really wants to be in the new space. But
Right.
how do you get there? It's like this really
Right.
the bridge is covered with rocks and pointy objects, and it's like, I don't know, like
Yeah, yeah. No, right, exactly right. And how many of those rocks and pointy objects are we just making up in our
making up.
heads?
Making
Right?
up.
Like,
Yeah.
totally right.
Yeah. Like
Yeah.
it's like assuming that everybody really cares about what Brian's doing,
Right.
when they're
Right.
really just concerned about what they're doing.
Of course, nobody's paying attention. I used to tell this to kids all the time, like whatever, I ran high schools for most of my career. It's like all the time you're spending thinking about how people are perceiving you, all of you are doing the same thing and nobody is perceiving anyone, particularly in high school. You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Yeah.
Like, what you perceive, what you think is being noticed once you get out of sort of that middle school conformity mentality. But it's just, and then it sort of sticks in a certain way. There's a great book. I think it's called The World's Religions. Houston Smith wrote it, but he sort of takes the pure essence of each of the major faiths and describes it. And the Hindus called the phase that I'm coming out of the householder phase. And you're raising your family, you're doing your work, and you're buying your house, and you're doing your thing. And then they, in its ideal design, you leave for a window of time and come back as a different person. Um, so, and then you can begin your spiritual exploration. And I'm turning 65 here in a couple of weeks. This last however many years it's going to be, or for that. Like that's what it's for. And you have to make this conscious schism um, to be able to make that transition. But there's a symbolic leaving and coming back, and you're no longer that. And we don't have that, right?
Yeah.
And I watch a lot of men, probably women too, sort of fail retirement because it's like if I don't have this defining quality of work or career or whatever that status was, then what am I and who am I and why, what's my even my purpose? And it's scary. It's a scary thing to say I'm gonna let that part go.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
I'm not there
No, obviously.
yet.
Still working,
Still working on it.
still in
That's
your crisp shirts.
that's exactly right. Exactly
Are you
right.
going to be like wearing fringe and leather?
Yeah, I live in the right town. Let me tell you. Yeah,
Yes, you do. You do.
very, I think keep staying.
So I guess that I was going to ask you what your next step is, and I guess that would more of that, I suppose. Sounds like that's kind of the plan. But there's this one of the things that's really striking me about this shamanism is that it doesn't seem like there is any place to get to. Like there's no, you're not seeking any sort of levels of uh
Attainment.
yeah.
Yeah, no, I agree. I agree with that.
So
Uh,
what is the motivating factor? What is the
what
desire?
That's an interesting question. I need to transcend like what I'm working on, if that's the question. Um, be it from a lot, whether this is whatever, definitely coming out of the closet. I'm a little cynical about humans. And, this is what I'm trying to work through. And I don't know whether it's reincarnation based, like I just had a lot of hard experiences, or what precipitated that. But I have a lot of faith in the natural world. I have a lot of faith in however we want to conceptualize God. I don't have a lot of faith in humans to do the right thing.
Mm.
And it's holding me back.
How
Like
so?
it's a level of, it's not a trusting, open approach to existence on the planet. Like Thea has a much more optimistic, hopeful perspective on humanity than I do. And she sometimes feels like it's optimistic to the point of naivete, and she's sort of working. Life will deal you some stuff, we can all attest. And you're going to get your teeth kicked down your throat a bunch of times. Because I know better than to be cynical about it or to assume bad intent. You know what I mean? I'm more suspicious than I need to be about my fellow humans. Um, so that's an area of growth for me. And I've seen a lot of beautiful, anymore, it's like the thing that's helping me transcend is like art in all forms is like the best of us, in my opinion. Like that it's an expression that just opens, I can't articulate this yet, but it opens a doorway forward to see the beauty of humanity for me, right? Like as people, and I do this too, like we're so insecure or afraid of death or something that we sort of try to insulate ourselves with either stuff or cushions or whatever to try to protect us from the reality of our existence, which is it's pretty tenuous if you really, but if you can sort of embrace that tenuousness, I feel like then the flower opens,
Mm.
because you're not protecting yourself from things that are inevitable and you don't have any control over anyway.
Yeah. I, I'm
So,
I'm I'm trying to figure out why your attitude toward humanity matters at all.
that's a great question because I think it takes me in terms of my own head, psychology, whatever, it brings me out of a more open, loving way of being in the world.
Mm.
Like it brings me into, for me, the manifestation is fight. It brings me into a fight.
Oh.
And that's not, I'm looking for fights that aren't there.
Hmm.
Um, I'm willing to fight when it isn't necessary. Part of that is probably moving every year for 13 years. Like I had to fight a lot,
Yeah, one
you
of the
know.
things we didn't mention is that you actually were in the military, but go ahead.
Yeah, yeah.
I
I
mean,
wasn't.
that is the training of your father and yourself. It's like, you know,
Yeah,
vigilance and
yeah,
distrust.
yeah. I think that's right. And whatever would precipitated that, I don't, I don't have a good handle on. But yeah, yeah.
Interesting.
So
And
where there's work to be done.
I love that your well, I guess this is true for all of us, but I love that your next assignment, so to speak, is to learn how to um, love and accept your fellow man, considering that, I mean, you're part of the species, so it can't be all
You're
bad.
damn right. I did a great journey on that, Kay. Just if you because I journeyed on this question
Uh,
the last time I was in one of these big workshops, and I'll tell it quickly because I know time is short. But in the journey, I'm floating down a river, and there are thousands and thousands of people sitting in a field, cross-legged, and all different types, colors, genders, like the world. It's a representative of all the people. And I climb out of the river on the other side of the river, and there's a space over with the crowd, right? An open space. And I'm like, I know it's my space. And they're like, you're one of them. Like, go sit with them.
wow. That's really
Isn't
powerful.
that great?
That's
Yeah,
really good.
yeah,
That's
yeah.
really good. I love that
Uh,
for you.
yeah, thank you. Yeah, it was good. It was good. Yeah.
Oh, that's great. Thank you so much for sharing all of that. I didn't know I know almost nothing about shamanism, so
Yeah.
it's interesting. It's very interesting.
It's a cool one.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
your exploration, like it for anybody's exploration, just as
So
information.
yeah, and then we'll put some links in the notes about people if people want to explore a little bit further. But let's switch over to the lightning round.
Okay.
So I have some questions for you.
Okay.
The first one is, if you could invent anything, what would it be?
Wow. I think that in the short term, I would like all of us to have the ability to move through time and space with some semblance of instantaneousness. So that if I could go see my cousin before he passed,
Mm.
because his wife called me and there's no. I'm getting there in time, So
Mm.
I think in the short term, the ability to move through time and space
Hmm.
sort of instantly would be, and
That,
whatever future past, whatever. But
yeah,
yeah, a transporter of sorts.
yeah.
Yeah.
That's really interesting because I've often thought of, this question of like bilocation or
Mhm.
teleportation and all of that.
Mhm.
But I've never been able to come up with a compelling reason why I would need that
Right,
power.
right, right.
So it's like,
Yeah.
okay, I could go to Venus, but I'm like, do I need to?
Do I want, right. Yeah. How important is this? Yeah.
How
A lot of this
important?
is just circuit. It's like we were talking about the Great Lakes. I would love to go back in time and see that.
Yeah.
Just to
Oh yeah.
see.
Yeah, for
I
sure.
would love to see Jesus or see Buddha talking to a crowd. Like, how
That's
cool would
true.
that be?
That would be very cool.
Right?
That would be you. I don't know why none of these things occurred to me, but those would be really awesome. Really awesome. Okay, number two, and this is the one I was alluding to earlier. Do you believe you are eternal? And if so, what does that feel like, and how does it shift your thinking and behavior?
Yeah, I definitely think my soul is eternal, and the energy of my being is eternal. Um, I don't know that it stands as an individual
Mm.
throughout eternity, but I think that
Mhm.
some form of that energy or soul goes on and on and on and on forever. I don't think it's always a person. I don't think it's always a physical thing. Like it could be any number of different things.
Mhm.
Um, and the way I think that worldview impacts my life is that I think it's a more humane way to think about life. I'm going to get some chances to figure things out.
Mhm.
It's not a like one and done feels nonsensical to me.
Yeah. Yeah.
You did bad, down you go, like, thank you for
Especially
eternity.
such a quick one,
Yeah, that's right. It's
like,
like I was barely here. I mean, humans, yeah, whatever. It's another one of these things that made me happy, but it's sort of if the Earth was 24 hours old, we've only been around for 17 minutes.
yeah.
Like we're not that big a deal. So I like thinking that makes me feel better.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's interesting that when posed with this type of question, most people think automatically of what would I be in matter? When
Mhm.
matter, it takes it's first of all, it isn't even real. It's like
Right,
it's
right, right.
space with
Right.
held together somehow by a mysterious force. So they're almost it's like in the vastness of the universe, as you spoke of earlier, it's so much more likely that you would be something non-physical.
Of course.
So much more likely.
Right,
The fact
right.
that you are in physical being is probably one of the most rare occurrences in eternity,
Totally.
right?
Totally right. And probably it's whatever for whatever learning that
Yeah.
we're here to sort of constellate in that physical form. And then you read about these sort of near-death experiences, and people are so relieved when they transcend the body. It's like,
Yeah.
thank God. Like,
And depressed when they have to come back.
and depressed when they have to come back because of the limitations of that physical form.
Patience, the limited.
Yeah.
I won't be sad if I don't come back. Just
Neither will my wife. You guys are going to be buddies up there.
yeah,
Yeah, I like the earth, but I can't
yeah.
figure out what to do about that.
Okay. What was your favorite band when you were 16?
So probably between two, and this is going to betray my age and window, but it was probably some combination of the Grateful Dead and Little Feat.
Okay. Yeah, I like
Yeah.
Little Feat too.
Yeah, thank you. Me too.
Yeah. We're
Yeah.
same era. Yeah.
Yeah.
Love that. Do you prefer small gatherings or big parties and why?
Uh, so I'm an extrovert. Um, so I like a little, as I gotten older, I think I've drifted more for sort of thinking about that Myers-Briggs thing. Um, but I like a little hubbub now and then. When I was young, I liked it a lot. Um,
Yeah.
whatever. I don't drink or do stuff anymore. But back in my partying days, there was nothing I liked better than a big free for all on a Friday night. And yeah, for sure, for sure.
Yeah. Yeah.
I like the intimacy better now. Like I tend to have dinner with my friends, like one on one, which is, and I really get a lot out of those exchanges now. But 30 years ago, that would have felt really boring to me.
Yeah.
So,
My last question for you is this is good too.
mm.
What do you feel hopeful about? We know it is not.
Yeah, no, but I mean, it feels to me from 10,000 feet like I'm hopeful about the fact that this is all purposeful. Like, even all the crap that's happening with our chucklehead president. Sorry to your conservative listeners, but you know, um, it, it's all purposeful. Like it's all moving towards something for us. We don't need to understand it. I feel that same way about our individual lives. Like I have a sense for maybe what my purpose is, but I'm sure there's a lot more going on that I'm aware of in terms of what I came to do and learn. And I
Mhm.
feel that way about sort of the broader scope as well, is that it's not random and it's not haphazard. And all of these experiences, as hard as they may, and I'm not trying to justify hardship because I think a lot of hard things happen that are horrible,
Mhm.
but that there is a purposefulness to things. Like it almost feels, like institutions are shaking right now. Like they're really interesting, right? And it's going to be really scary for a lot of people, but there's purposefulness to that. And I think there's an evolution. That's my hopeful side is that, these things are going to fall apart so something better can come.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I feel like I used to have when I was younger, I used to have a greater desire to for that moment when I'm going to understand
Right.
everything that has happened and my role in the for big and small in all of it. And as I age, I am less interested,
Right.
way less
Totally.
interest. I don't even think there's anything that I really want to know. I think it's like I've had
That's
enough. I've had enough information. No,
Yeah.
that's not it. I feel like I really am looking forward to that eternal just being, that
Mm.
sense of exhale and peace and unconditional love and
Right.
joy. And yeah, that's what I'm looking for. I don't need any explanations.
You and Thea are speaking such similar languages,
Yeah,
like really interesting
yeah,
because that's right. And it's not complicated for her.
yeah, yeah.
And it doesn't sound like it is for you either. Like,
Getting
and
that
you
way.
know that it's real,
Yeah,
and that is something that you're going to get. It's
yeah,
great.
yeah. I hope. Yeah. Did you bring a question for me today?
Yeah, and it's we've alluded to it a bunch of times. So, the last time when you were here with us in Ojai, you were going to a workshop um, to watch other people have the experience that the workshop was providing, but you had already had it for yourself and didn't feel the need to have that experience again for you.
Hmm.
And I just found that so interesting because you were just there to sort of witness. It's what you're doing with this podcast. Like it's a really pretty selfless, and I don't want you to feel uncomfortable, but it's a lot of interest in others that I think might be more unusual than you think it is. And
Mm,
I'm curious what precipitates that? Like where is this sort of like it's a generosity of interest and maybe it's a gift, like whatever that is, but where does that come up from for you? Like your whole podcast is grounded around this same concept, which
hmm.
is other people, you giving other people the space to talk about themselves,
Hmm.
right? And it's just I find it an interesting sort of call.
Mm,
I'm
mm,
curious about your own perspective on your perspective on what you're doing with that.
mm. Well, I feel like I've had the good fortune of knowing exactly where my lane is and what my mission is. Because I do know what my lane is, I'm not tempted to make it become grandiose
Mhm.
because I haven't witnessed that grandiosity actually serves anybody, including the person themselves. So, I first of all, that mission, that calling is that I'm standing at the precipice of great change,
Mhm.
like all of us are.
Mhm.
But I have a little lantern and I have a little cooler full of drinks, and
Uh,
my job is to stand at the bridge and do what I can to help people at that particular juncture. It's so it's like it's an enormous point in people's lives. It's like this waking up journey, this like inner the potential for this inner explosion and expansion. It's like right there. You can almost sense it in someone. It's usually they come to that moment with trauma or
Mhm.
great insecurity, great fear,
Mhm.
great sorrow, great trouble. And so it, it was like my desire to give examples of one, how unique that journey is to each of us,
Mhm.
and to show how what the journey leads to. So I'm wanting to provide examples of, yes, it feels like breakdown, it feels like disaster, and on the other side of that is what you're referring to is the great, is purpose.
Mhm.
It's greater peace of mind, it's greater whatever, better, better. I feel like everything that I'm trying to do is feeding into that very specific purpose. And
Mhm.
I just don't feel tempted to try and make it bigger or better or well, better, yes, of course, I want to become better,
Mhm.
but
Mhm.
more important or to, have it mean anything more than the little lantern. Like I feel like there's beauty in that. And I also feel like I've come to believe that if it's true that we are all sparks of the divine, and the divine is has created you for the perspective of you, I want to see in that too. You know,
Mm,
I really want to know, like, I feel like when I'm sitting in front of people, it's like sitting in front of God. It's like,
mm.
what did God want to learn when he created Brian? You know, like,
Right.
and you know, this kind of dialogue is a way to understand that. And I think that what I've done enough self reflection and self inquiry that I don't need for somebody else to know what's going on here. If you're interested, fine, but I don't feel the need to talk about it because I've done so much of it like ad nauseum.
Right.
So it's kind of boring to me. It's not boring, but it's not of interest to me. It's not as interesting as getting to know, you know, what's really going on with other people. So
It's
anything.
really generous. Okay.
Well, thank you.
Yeah. Super cool.
Yeah. Well, I think we could go on for a very long time.
Yeah,
Maybe
really
we'll
fun.
maybe we'll bring you back at some point. But for now, I just want to thank you for being so open and willing to talk about this. I love having men on the podcast because I feel like it's so important.
Mm.
And so thank you for serving in that way.
My pleasure. It was really an honor, and I really enjoyed it. So thank you for having me.